Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Council of Graduate Schools webinar. My name is Matthew Linton. Today's webinar is going to be English language assessment for prospective international graduate students, promoting greater access while ensuring valid and secure results. This webinar is sponsored by Duolingo English Test. So a couple of quick notes before we get started with the presentations. The webinar recording, as well as the slides, will be emailed to participants, as well as posted on the CGS website. We usually try to get that done within a week of the live event. You can submit questions at any time through the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side, though we will be answering all of the questions during a designated question and answer session following the presentations. When you submit a question, it'd be really helpful also if you could direct who you would like to answer the question. It will just streamline the Q&A process for us. If you're experiencing any sorts of technical issues, troubleshooting help is available at the URL below. The most common technical issue we run into is problems with audio. So if you're having trouble hearing us, you can try switching to a different audio connection. You can toggle from telephone to mic and speakers or vice versa without leaving the session in the audio panel of the GoToWebinar control panel. If you're experiencing trouble with a telephone connection, you can click problem dialing in for an alternate phone number to dial. So with that, I'd like to pass the presentation baton over to Dr. Julia Kent, Vice President of Best Practices and Strategic Initiatives here at CGS. Julia?
Thank you, Matt, and good afternoon, everyone. And to our members on the West Coast, good morning. Welcome. So we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a year of unprecedented challenges, and especially for international students. As many of you know, CGS recently released findings from our annual International Graduate Admission Survey, which tracks the applications and enrollments of international students seeking U.S. master's and doctoral degrees. And while the survey reported substantial declines in first-time enrollment of international graduate students in 2020, there are reasons for optimism about the future. We estimate that had it not been for the global pandemic, we might have had more international graduate students enrolled at U.S. institutions in fall 2020 than in fall 2019. Prior to the onset of COVID-19, the number of applications for master's and certificate programs for fall 2020 exceeded that for fall 2017, the prior record high, and doctoral applications also increased. So looking to the fall 2021 admission cycle and beyond, we here at CGS remain optimistic about the overall attractiveness of U.S. graduate education to international students. And so this is one of many reasons why I'm pleased that today's webinar will focus on promoting greater access for international graduate students to U.S. graduate education and streamlining their admissions process. So I'd like to give a sincere thanks to Duolingo English Test for their programmatic and financial support of the webinar. And in addition, I'd like to welcome them as the newest member of the CGS Sustaining Membership Network, which allows companies to demonstrate their commitment to advancing graduate education. So at this time, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. Jennifer Spire is a Senior Associate Director of Admissions and Recruitment for the Information Networking Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. She leads various strategic recruitment initiatives for the Institute, including overseeing admissions processes for the ionized array of technical master's programs and ensuring a comprehensive application review and notification process for all prospective students. She led the implementation of the Duolingo English Test as an alternate option for students in fall of 2020, and we look forward to hearing from her today. Ryan Munson is the Graduate Engagement Manager for the Duolingo English Test, where Ryan works with over 100 colleges and universities throughout North America. And Ryan has worked in higher education and enrollment management for almost 2 decades. At his previous company, Ryan ran the Chegg China tour and has traveled extensively throughout the country. So again, thanks to our presenters, and without further ado, I will turn it over to Ryan.
Perfect. Thank you, Julia. And a big thank you to CGS for letting us give this opportunity to bring the Duolingo English test to everyone, and of course to have Jennifer talk about her experience at CMU and the experience implementing our test. So from here, I think I'll take over, and then I'm going to bring Jennifer on a little bit later to talk about her experience. But we're going to dive right in and talk about the Duolingo English test. And from here, the quick agenda, we're going to talk quickly about the international education, where it is today in 2021, give a quick overview of the Duolingo English test, dive into some research and security, and then have Jennifer come on, talk about use and practice, and then I'll also talk about implementation as well. And then we'll leave time for Q&A at the end, because I'm sure a lot of you, as we are fairly new to the graduate market, will have some questions. So let's go ahead and get started, because we have a lot to cover. So international education in 2021, I think this month really emphasizes it's been about a year since we all kind of went into lockdown. And that really changed the landscape, not only for testing and international students, but for admissions as well. So what are we hearing? So I think all of us have talked, if we look at app completion, if we look at visas, if we look at all the difficulties students have had during this pandemic, there's stories throughout the news. There's, Facebook message boards that we're a part of, and admissions advisory boards that, it's kind of been chaotic for this past year. We've all had to kind of muddle through that and try and help the students as best we can. And so we were in a really great position last year to be able to help. And so we were really excited to be able to, step in and take over a few things at different places throughout the country. So what are we seeing? And actually these numbers have changed even to, it's actually plus 2,000 and plus 2,000%. So we've exponentially grown in the past year. Again, we were in that right position, right time, being an online exam to be able to help those students that were looking to come to the United States to study, where traditional tests and testing centers were shut down for almost a year. So we were just in a great place, and we have seen growth just across the board with accepting institutions, and of course, students using our exam for admissions. So how do we respond? Again, right time, right place, but having unlimited seats really created a perfect scenario for students. So there is no, requirement to book an appointment. There's no requirement of seats. You can come do our test 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter where you are in the world. We have around-the-clock support, which I'm really proud of. So if you do have a technical difficulty or need that support, you can reach our staff, and of course, our Mandarin and Cantonese speakers take over during China daytime hours, so you're able to speak your own language and not have to, muddle through anything if English is your second language. And then we have 100% uptime, so we've never dropped, during this entire year. Our test has been running at full function, and we're really proud of that. We have a great team in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that makes sure that we're up and running. We have satellite teams throughout the world as well. Next slide. So a quick background on what is Duolingo. So Duolingo has been around for almost a decade now. At our heart and soul, we're a language app, and we teach actually 39 distinct different languages. We're the iTunes and Google Play App of the Year. We're always in the top 10, if not #1, in the education side of iTunes, and we're definitely the most downloaded education app that's out there. With over 300 million users throughout the world, I'm on a 290-day streak of learning German or staying up on my German. It's completely free, and that's really our heart and soul where we started almost a decade ago. So behind that, this all kind of ties back to CMU as well. So Luis Von Ahn is one of our founders. He was actually a professor at CMU. One of his PhD students had the idea of Duolingo, and they combined together. CMU even helped fund the original idea of Duolingo, and they came out with this language app that's really kind of taken over. But Luis Von Ahn was born and raised in Guatemala, so his international education is similar to a lot of our international students that are looking to do grad work in the United States. He's also the inventor of CAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA. So if you're not familiar with those, if you ever had to fill out a squiggly line and said, tried to buy concert tickets or what have you, and you had to fill out whatever that fuzzy word was, you can blame Luis. He invented both of those and then sold those off to Google. But you can always curse him under your breath if you'd like to. He's also won many, many awards. I could list them all, but if you ever want to Google Luis Vanon, please do. He has some great TED Talks as well about the idea of Duolingo and really what we've come from. But the idea of the Duolingo English test really came from Luis as well, with some others at Duolingo. And his international journey, which we'll talk about a little bit during this presentation, also was a lot of help. And we really came up with the idea of how we should implement this test. So I want to dive into a quick test overview and talk about some aspects of the exam. So first and foremost, we need to be accessible. Again, this goes back to the idea of having it fair for all students across the world, no matter where they are within the world, to be an accessible exam where they live, and not have to make them travel to a testing center, not have to book an appointment, and do this at really as cheap as we possibly can. So we're a $49 US test. And so that is, amongst, if not the cheapest test that's available out there. And so accessibility is key to us when we built this exam. Next slide. On the note of accessibility, again, this number actually has jumped up a little bit in the last couple of months as well. We had 177 when we wrote this, different countries that were represented with students testing within that country. We're now over 200. So we're really proud of the fact that no matter where you're at in the world, again, accessibility was available to those students and they're able to process their exam and then apply it to US institutions. Next slide. Comprehensive. So we knew we needed to be a comprehensive exam. We do this in a little bit different ways, which we're going to dive into a little bit more greater detail when we talk about the research and the construct of the exam itself. But we're still measuring those basic skills of every student that the other exams do as well. So that's speaking, writing, reading, and listening, coming up with an overall score and then our sub-scores, and then writing samples and a video interview as well. All combined to do a comprehensive exam that you can trust and use for admissions. And then facts. When I was doing my admissions work, I remember I would wait up to 2 weeks for an exam to get back so I could process an application and issue the visa or the I-20. And so we wanted something that could come back much faster. So the test is up to an hour and sometimes less than, and then it is a 2-day turnaround time as far as getting that test back to the student for them to be able to share to university or whatever they need to use that for. And so it's a very fast turnaround time for both the student and the universities. Security is probably the #1 question that I get. We will dive into some more details about our security and how we keep our tests secure. But as a tech and language company, we're very nimble and can adjust very quickly to any kind of environment that's online. And so I can never say that our test is 100% secure because there's no test that's out there that's 100%. But I dare say that we're at 99.9. We're very proud of our security. And then, the test is no good if it's not accurate, right? So we have to have an accurate test that no matter how many times you take the test, you would still get the similar score. And so we do have some research backing that, which also we're going to get to a little bit and touch on. And there's some webinars that everyone can actually go to and look at the research behind how we, stay reliable in an accurate exam. So it's definitely a new model in a different format. We are an adaptive test, so we do adapt in real time to the student's abilities. The reason we do that is we're actually going to get into the reasons behind that, but the biggest reason is just for speed, to be able to find that student's average and then test within that average really quickly to make sure we can actually get that test done within that 60-minute time frame. So it's definitely highly predictive of English skills. It's administered a little bit different, which we're going to get into the details of that. So it's a definite different model, but it's one that really is cohesive with the students and their abilities, and then of course getting those scores back to universities. So again, we could dive into the question types and why we chose those question types, but I wanted to show this slide because I think a lot of people, when they think, we're going to turn 5 years old here this summer, so we have not been around very long. I have talked to people in the past and said, well, you're a new test, so you must have just come up with the questions on your own. Absolutely not true. We actually pick questions that have been researched and why we pick those questions. They're filling a need, whether it be for one of the sub-scoring or everything is based around that student's ability. So in this slide, which you'll see, of course, when we send the slides out to you, you can see the research behind each question type and why we chose those question types to go within our exam. We want to talk about research and security. I think these are our two biggest topics, and so we'll dive into some of those details. So, being a new test, we also have to correlate well with the tests that are already existing. And so we did two major tests between TOEFL and IELTS, and then of course with Duolingo and IELTS, and then Duolingo with TOEFL. What you can see there is how many students we actually tested. You can see the graph there to the right of where those scores landed. Between TOEFL and IELTS, they correlated at 0.73. Between Duolingo and IELTS, we correlate at a 0.78. These correlation studies are continually in use. Our new one actually will be coming out in the next few months. So the more data we get, of course, the better. But we want to make sure that we correlate well because we all know that we're using the other scores. And we probably already have cutoff scores with all the other tests that are out there. So we need to make sure that we correlate well with that so we can come up with a proper score that you can use for the Duolingo English test. Next slide is going to talk about the correlation between Duolingo and TOEFL, and we're at a 0.77 there as well. Anything that we talk about score-wise, our correlation tables, our research, actually can be found on our website, and you can see the link there below as far as how to disseminate our score, how to disseminate our subscoring, and things like that. So our scale and concordance table, for those that have been around with us since the beginning, you definitely know that we have changed this at least once. Our original score was 0 through 100. We went away from that scoring. We had a lot of people that were equating that with, an A, B, C, or D grade. If you got an 80 on a test, they'd say, oh, you got a B minus. But that's not how we graded it all, so we stepped away from that. And we also wanted to correlate with the standards. There is that measure, if you take that test over and over again, of how many you're going to get wrong or the scoring range that you should be within. And that's usually about 5 points. So we moved to a 5 to 160 scale. And you can see that concordance table there in front of you. The far left-hand side is that Common European Framework of Reference. That's how the test was built. We can dive into the research of that a little bit later on. But then, of course, you have the concordance table there on your right, how our scoring lines up with a test that's readily available, which would be the TOEFL. So we also talk about how do we evaluate a student's ability. And one of the sections of the test is where a student actually has a speaking, they're able to speak on camera to questions that they get to choose from. They also get to write some essays as well. And so what this is showing you is there's definitely a difference when if I were to walk into a university, into the English department, and I give them an essay, that rater might say, okay, well, this essay is an A minus essay. And if I take that same essay and I walk into a completely different university, that professor might say, this is probably a B plus essay. So there's definitely a lot of differentiation of how they're going to evaluate a student's ability in the speaking and writing aspects. So we mix a lot of that together. And what I mean by that is we take human raters and then our computer rating as well. The computer is non-biased. It doesn't matter where you're from. It's going to grade the same across the board. And we need that baseline, but we also want the human aspect as well. And so we combine all of those to come up with a composite score for their speaking and writing. And we'll dive into a little bit of that later on. So I do want to touch on some research. We had our latest peer-reviewed publication come out in 2020. You can find all of our research online. There will be a link within this presentation to where you can click on and dive into all of our research. But again, everything can be found on our website. You can download and actually go through the research. All those that are on our research team are also available. So if you ever want to reach out to them, they're happy to respond to any questions. And we actually just had a very large research webinar today that will be available if you want to dive into more specific questions around research and related to linguistics and things that our research team is working on. I did want to talk about bias. So, being a new exam, we want to make sure that we are not biased across any of the sections of the world that we're available in. As we have grown, we want to make sure that we continue to be a non-biased test and that we're fair across the board. And so we have this new research study that just came out as well. Again, there's the URL at the bottom of this slide that you can click on or type in and actually find all this research. And what was great about this research is it came out obviously that we were a non-biased test and we want to stay that way. So we're fair across the board for all students. Test administration, so delivering this is quite different. I touched on this a little bit being a computer adaptive exam. I did want to talk about the reason that we chose that. Again, I talked about speed and being able to find that average of the student and then test within that hour. And so let's go to the next slide, Matt, and I think we'll draw upon the adaptive testing and how that works. So we're definitely not the first adaptive test, but everyone's going to get a baseline of questions. And then within that baseline, we're going to find, where our starting point should be. And then whether or not that student gets those questions correct or incorrect is going to indicate what their next question will be. And that adaptive model is throughout the entire exam. And so not only are we finding, level of difficulty of the questions, but we also want to hone on their actual skill. And so the next question is going to be a little bit more honed to what we really want to test for, whether that be reading, writing, things of that nature. And so by doing this adaptive model, it also makes our test really secure, as in you're not going to see the same question twice if you take the test, right in a row. If I took it right now and I took it again immediately after, I'm not going to see the same questions because it's constantly adapting. And that helped really with our security from data mining, from students trying to, memorize questions and answers and then get into our test and take it. You could regurgitate everything that you remember off the exam, and it most likely won't help the next student because their test will be completely different. So I just kind of touched on this a little bit, that exposure rate. So we do have to retire questions if they're exposed so much, but what we do is we limit students to take the test twice every 30 days, and that's on a rolling 30-day average. So if I took the test today, I get my results back within 48 hours. I don't like those results. I can immediately go back into my account and take the test again. Once I've taken it that second time, I'm then locked out for a 30-day period. And by doing this, we're limiting our exposure rate, and we're also, making sure students can't go in and just retake and retake and retake to try to up their score. They're only able to take it again that twice every 30-day rolling average. And so it really helps with our exposure rate. And you can see what you're seeing there in front of you is, compared to other tests that are given, and where our exposure rate actually lies is quite low. Again, if I were trying to memorize questions and answers, and I was able to take the test, twice every 30 days, it'd take me around 41 years to actually see the same question twice. And so we're really proud of that. It keeps our test very secure and our item base very secure. So we can add to that item base and retire questions as necessary, but it stops students from, again, that memorization aspect of the test. Certification process looks a little different. I did want to talk about this because this is going to touch on security as well. So again, if I'm an international student, I take the exam today, I'm going to upload those results. Those are automatically in an AI review. And so AI is kind of flagging anything that looks suspicious. So again, I'm in my house, as probably most of you are as well. If, my dog were to come into the camera view, or if, my wife were to walk by the camera, AI is looking for anything like that. So it's also looking for electronic signatures as well. So if it detects a USB keyboard or anything kind of, I have 3 monitors in front of me. No one would know that since you're looking directly at my face, but the AI would know that. So AI is flagging anything it sees as suspicious during the actual full exam. Once the exam is completed, AI will also do the grading on certain aspects of the test. This then goes to our first human round of proctoring. And the human is looking at anything that AI flagged. So, if 30 minutes into the test, it says there was something suspicious, my eye movement was off, or something came into the frame of the picture, the human rater would then go in and say, okay, yep, at 30 minutes within the test, Ryan has someone walk into the room, which is against our security protocol, so unfortunately we wouldn't be able to certify that exam. Round 2 proctoring will then go into not only anything that round 1 from AI and round 2 from the human proctoring went through and look at those flags, but they're also going to start grading as well. So they want to make sure that those written essays and the interviews match the students' skills on what they were graded on during the exam. So they're doing a little human rating. As long as proctoring 1 and proctoring 2 line up and everything looks well, they will then certify that exam. Unfortunately, if round 1 and round 2 don't correlate, this will then go to a third human rater who will make a final decision on whether or not to certify that exam. And then once that happens, they'll make that final decision. That decision is then sent to the student, whether or not that certified test was done, and if they can share that test or not. Again, this is why we have that 48-hour turnaround time. Otherwise, our test would actually almost be readily available as soon as you complete it. We want to make sure and double check anything during the full exam. Then, of course, have our human raters go into the exam as well. So using computer vision and biometrics, we do quite a bit of this during the exam. So you can imagine all the different tools that are at our disposal. So eye tracking, lip movement, keystroking the student, voice recognition, checking their IDs against their actual face that's in camera. All this is going on unbeknownst to the student as they take the full exam and during their onboarding. So I want to talk about security as far as the proctoring goes. So I think very early on, we had a lot of, universities or colleges say, well, if a student goes to a proctoring or a test center and they show their ID and they sit within that room and take that full exam and then they leave, a human proctor is looking over their exam. And that's very true. And it definitely has happened for years and years and years. The difference is when we record the actual session and we not only record video, but audio, we actually can go back and look at that test at any point in time. And sometimes it's 2 to 1, or every time it's 2 to 1, sometimes 3 to 1, the humans that are looking at a full exam to make sure that it's a certifiable exam. Back to the proctoring, when I proctored tests at the university that I worked for, if I didn't catch something, I only had one chance at it. And if it got through, it got through. And that's why, I'd have tests that came back and we'd have to unvalidate those months after because we found out about something that happened during that session. So I always like to relate back to that because you have a lot more human eyes on our tests than just one-time shot at a proctoring or a testing center. So in practice, I am actually going to turn over some time to Jennifer and let Jennifer take over, and I will see you guys shortly. Jennifer, all yours.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Every time I listen to a presentation about Duolingo, I learn something new, and I'm always so excited. So I think, Matt, you can go on to the next slide. But there might be some things you can move forward on that as well. So I wanted to sort of provide some context from the graduate school perspective that I thought might help everyone on this call, because I know as somebody who is a non-technical person who's worked in admissions in varying ways for over 20 years, I'm always looking for sort of the next thing to support our students. And when I started to learn about Duolingo and really started to dig into the information as a non-technical person, I really started to think, wow, this could be a great solution for our students. I hear all of the things that they're saying in terms of safety and security that matter most to myself and to the faculty and those kinds of things. So I'll start off by telling you a little bit about where I work and my graduate program to see how that compares to where you are and kind of go from there. So we are a technical master's program within the College of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon University called the Information Networking Institute. We offer only master's programs in information networking, security, and mobile and IoT engineering. So as you can imagine, a lot of these machine learning and different techniques are being taught in our classroom, used by our students and created by our students as well. So for me, that was also a really nice connection. And obviously being at Carnegie Mellon, the place that sort of bore this idea, was exciting to me as well. We use Slate as our CRM, and we didn't touch upon this, but it's actually, they've created a really nice API with Slate to help admissions offices integrate the information immediately. So that was something that was really exciting to me as well. And the other thing that made this really nice is that we receive a lot of applications for a small department, and we do a very holistic and faculty-led application review. And so what that means is this year in particular, I wanted to pull some numbers. We had about 1,400 applications started for our students, which translated into about 1,000 completed applications for us to review. And 85% of those are international students submitting English proficiency testing. Obviously, the majority of those are coming in through TOEFL with some IELTS students. And so the option to sort of increase that and to allow our students greater access, greater accessibility, and timing was really important to me. Each one of our applications is reviewed first by admissions and then goes through a 2-faculty review, and then finally comes to a committee and our director decides. So we're seeing these applications a lot, and having secure, reliable information, particularly about English proficiency, is really, really important to us. And I'll be honest, when I came across Duolingo, this was 2 years ago, prior to the pandemic, and when I brought this to the faculty, there was definitely a lot of questions about all of the things Ryan talked about in terms of security and reliability and accuracy, and how will this compare to TOEFL. and IELTS, and that is really important to us. And so we decided to take kind of a short, slow onboarding approach. So for that first year, we really did a soft launch where we put it onto our website but didn't announce it very big, and invited students to submit this as an alternative English test. And really, and the other interesting thing that we did was to ask students if we felt that they were on the edge or we weren't sure about their existing testing, to actually go out and take this test. And you know, there were certainly mixed thoughts about doing that, but in the end, students were open to having that. And then I was able to have some comparable data, right? Because I'm being asked, and I hear from the faculty, I'm new to the department, and I'm hearing things about, you know, concerns for English in the classroom, and this really gave me a lot of information that I could build on to grow our students. So it was a really interesting sort of implementation process. And what happened was we got some good data, we really appreciated the ease of use, and then it opened up to the entire College of Engineering. So we're one of 11 programs within the College of Engineering at CMU. And for the second year, fall of 2021, all of those departments actually opened this up to students. Can you go to the next slide? So again, now that we've really used this, some of the things that I love about it or like about it or think that are useful for an admissions office considering whether or not to use this really align with many of Ryan's points, right? It is our goal to increase and improve accessibility for our students, right? One of our target goals is to diversify our applicant pool. A majority of those international students right now are coming from China and India, and we want to be able to increase that pool and to have a company and an organization that is available in almost 200 countries in real time at any time was something that was really interesting and exciting for us. The increase in flexibility was really helpful because oftentimes we'll hear from students, well, I can't get in to take a TOEFL test, or during the pandemic, obviously the centers were closed or they're scoring things different. Or we would identify a really strong student and want some information about their English proficiency quickly, right? And so this test really allowed me to reach out directly to students if I had those questions, ask them to take the test, and within 48 hours, we had the test in our system and were able to use that in an admissions review, which is really, really amazing. I think this is going to come after my presentation, but they have a really amazing dashboard that makes it very easy to use for both users like myself, administrators, and faculty who are trying to look at scores, as well as students. So for our first year during the implementation, we did not integrate it directly into our Slate CRM. And so we did need to go into their dashboard. And what's really nice is we could identify a group of students per se that we wanted to request them to use the test. And they have functionality where you can send an email invite out to a group of students or one student asking them to take the test, and then have access to those scores. And it's also very easy for the student to navigate. So if I were to ask them to do that, there were 2 or 3 steps that I could say, go in there, select the College of Engineering at CMU, take the test, and come back to us. And that was really, really important to me because there is such a knowledge about TOEFL and IELTS, and to be able to find a new alternative that's new to students that they didn't hear about, and to be able to offer them an ease of use is just really important to me as an admissions director. I will say that, we did reach out to the faculty, and I did ask them as I was preparing for today's conversation about their thoughts about Duolingo. And I would say in general, there were very, very positive feedback in terms of, and you can see a quote here from one of our faculty members, but having the ability to see the video, to watch that in real time within the application was something that our faculty didn't necessarily know that they wanted, didn't think they would appreciate, but in the end would come back to me and say, oh, is there a Duolingo test for this student? Oh, can you get a Duolingo test for this student? So that's really, that was really something that we appreciated. I will say that when we opened up the application across all of the College of Engineering, there were definitely mixed reviews in terms of how much it was used. So this 505 number that you see on the slide is the number of students who submitted Duolingo tests in the fall 2021 admission cycle. Obviously, that's a low number compared to the number of students who submitted TOEFL, but from what I understand from Duolingo, for a new school that's onboarding the program, that is average. That's not a few, that's not an over amount, but that's kind of in the middle range. And for us, I think it's only going to grow the more we talk about it and the more we promote it and we have students who have success. I will add one other thing and then let Ryan move on and be available for questions. One of the things that I really appreciated here is, again, being non-technical, our faculty had a lot of questions for me. And so I really have felt like I was in a supportive environment where if I didn't know the answer, I could go to Duolingo and they would provide research to back up these claims. They would help our students if they were struggling. They were a partner in this implementation. And again, for me, when you're thinking about all the tools and technologies that we use in admissions, and there are many, to have that kind of support is really, really helpful. So I think that those are kind of the things I wanted to mention, and I'm happy to answer particular questions if people are wondering about what an onboarding process is like. Ryan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Really appreciate that. And I think to echo what Jennifer said, part of my job is to be the face of Duolingo with universities. So, if Jennifer has an issue, or she always can reach me, but we also have a great support team that's available 24 hours a day that she can reach as well. So I'm the main point of contact for all the graduate programs here in North America. Well, I shouldn't say North America, I should say the US, because we have a different gentleman for Canada. But yeah, it's probably the best part of my job is working with universities and being able to help and be someone that they can connect with. So it's a lot of fun. Jennifer did talk about the dashboard, so I did want to talk about that just a little bit in our Open API. And so what the Open API is, really, it doesn't matter the CRM system that you use. With our Open API, you should be able to implement our scores within that CRM, or you can completely just use our dashboard that we give you access to once you're up and running. Really simplistic, really easy to use that Jennifer had mentioned, but I'm happy to dive into more details of that if you ever want to see an actual dashboard and look at what those student results look like. Let's go to the next slide, Matt. This is just a snapshot of our internal dashboard. So you can see some sample students there. You'll see their overall score. You see a section for their interview and their certificates. The interview is going to have their essays and their speaking interviews. And then, of course, certificate of their overall scores and their sub-scoring. We won't dive into too much of that, but I did want to show you a snapshot of how simple we make that to make it really easy to find students and then, of course, assess those within admissions. Two things that I just talked about were the video interview and the writing sample. So what you can see there in front of you is a question that was asked to the student, and then, of course, them responding. And then, of course, the written response is right behind that. And those live within the dashboard as well. So what Jennifer was talking about with the faculty is they could go in, see that student speak and write in the language, and then assess that student and say, okay, yeah, we feel that they're going to be fit for this program. And it's always a great sanity check for those faculty members. Jennifer did talk about Slate. So we integrated very, very early on with Slate. So if you have Slate within your campus or within your program, we're technically already there. We just have to turn it on. And then once we're turned on, all your scores will go into your Slate system. So it's really easy of use. And then to start receiving results, it's actually super easy. If you want to click on that link, once you get this presentation, feel free to do so. You also can email myself and I can help onboard you or talk about the options as far as getting started. All of our templates, our guides, our technical guide, which is really important for research. Again, this all lives online, is all downloadable for free. And those links will be within this presentation. So feel free to do so. But of course, you can always reach out to me and I can help you guide through that process. So big thank you. I know we're probably all, webinared out over this past year. I know this small room of mine is getting pretty claustrophobic. I'll admit that. But I want to make a huge thank you to, again, the CGS for helping us put this webinar together. Huge thank you to Jennifer and CMU for volunteering and coming on board to help answer questions. And so I think we're right on time and we want to make sure we leave some time for questions. So of course, Jennifer and myself are ready to go. Oh, one last thing. Those are the emails. So if you would rather just ask anonymously or through an email, please do so. My email is there, Jennifer's email. And if you have specific research questions, I ask that you use that research email because that goes right to the research team and you'll get the best answer at the fastest way possible. If you ask myself, I am no researcher and I will not be able to answer it. So it's just going to get passed on to them anyway.
Well, thanks both of you for your great presentation. And now we're going to move on to some audience questions. So the first audience question is for Ryan. With asynchronous proctoring, how do you know the students are not cheating?
Great question. So we dove into some of those details a little bit during the presentation itself, but to make sure that the student, isn't gaining advantage, we're using that biometric data to make sure that the student is the person they say they are, first of all, by going through their ID and then biometric with their face that's on the camera. Then, of course, we do some things that we can release. We can't release all our secrets for security, but keystroking that student, making sure, when they're speaking, that their mouth is actually lining up with what they're saying. That's another way that we really will catch the students that are trying to gain that advantage. But we have a bunch of tools that are both human and AI related that help us make sure our test is secure. But it's a really good question.
And can I just jump in, Ryan, there? Because I will say from the user side and the university side, we've had a number of students over this past 2 years who do come back to us and say, they weren't able to validate my test. This is real, it does happen. Some students, go through this over and over and they've had difficulty validating. But again, back to the user experience, right? Even when it's been frustrating, these particular students, that limit of 2 tests doesn't apply, and they're able to go back in and retake the test and work with Duolingo to, create a better environment for the test and talk through what are some of the things that might not be working in the system. And so we've really had positive experiences for students who even struggle with the test. So I think that's a really good thing to mention.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I'm glad you brought that up. So I think that kind of relates to tech errors. So let's say if I was taking the test and my test or my internet just went out. That's not, a problem for the student as far as they didn't cause that action to happen. So if they come to our tech team and we can see if their internet drops, we'll actually just let them retest completely for free right away. And so, that limit of 2 doesn't apply to those tech errors and things like that. So that's what Jennifer was alluding to. And so, yeah, we're happy to do that for the student.
So I've got a question here from Kimberly Kenyon for Ryan. What are examples of speaking prompts that assess at 100 plus? And how long are students responding to a speaking prompt for?
Good question. So probably the best one would be our C-test, and that is within the slides. You actually can see a sample of the C-test. So the C-test is a question that is a full paragraph, and the first and last sentence are complete sentences. Everything else within that paragraph is broken. The student has to type that, and then we ask the student to speak those as well. And so that is a big part of our speaking score. You can see more research behind why we chose the C-test and why we put that and implemented that within our exam. Also, when I speak about the video interview, we actually have 2 interview questions. One is human and AI graded. One is not graded at all. So the one that is going to the universities, the one that Jennifer sees, is actually the ungraded portion of that speaking score. The student is aware they're not being graded, and the reason behind that, one is for security. We just don't want our interview questions out there to be memorized. And two, when they know they're not being graded, the student tends to open up with their abilities a bit more. And so instead of just answering a question really directly and really quickly, they tend to say, okay, I can think about this, I can give some more detail because I'm not being graded. And so that's why the ungraded portions are sent to the universities. But good question.
Great. And Ryan, a question actually that's almost a follow-up to that. Is the video interview portion of the DET optional or required?
It is required. And actually, I didn't answer one of Kim's questions. They are timed on that C-test as well. I believe they have 2 to 3 minutes to finish that paragraph. So going back to that one.
So Ryan, this might be a question that you'll want to do a follow-up for, and we will send out a follow-up email with the recording and the slides that we can include some additional information on if people need it. But Amanda Rollins asks, my institution is concerned both about admission accessibility and student success once they enter the university. Do you have any data that links Duolingo with student academic success? And Jennifer, you might also be able to speak to this.
So Jennifer, I'm going to go first, but I'll let you definitely dive in. So what we're actually looking for is for universities to be able to provide that data to us. So since we were just turning 5, we haven't had a ton of robust data behind academic success. Those that have shared, I can't actually mention the schools because they've asked us not to, but we do have studies that are currently going for that. But if you're willing to be a university that will share that data, that is rich, valuable data to us, and we are more than welcome to start those validity or student success research projects. And of course, happy to do that. But Jennifer, I'll let you speak to student success.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important to us as well. And we've gotten that question from faculty. And so I'll be honest, again, because this is new, I don't think we've done the level of what's the word? The level of looking into the analysis of the research that we want to, but I'm feeling really good about building that information. So for us, exactly the first year, as I mentioned, I have a good 40 to 50 students where I have both Duolingo and TOEFL or IELTS scores. So that's one piece of the puzzle. Plus then obviously I have their school records, right? Their success records. Then this year I have some of that overlap, but not as much because we opened it up and allowed students to only submit Duolingo. And so our plan absolutely is to look at that longitudinal. And so, you know, I think we're open to sharing that with Duolingo, but that hasn't been decided yet. But I will say, to Ryan's point, when we started this and our faculty really wanted some assistance, Duolingo immediately offered to allow us to select anywhere from 30 or 40 to 100 or so of our current students to come in and take the test for free. I don't know if that's still on the table, but to work with us to allow them to do that and look at some of this research. So I think that is absolutely true, that if you're a school that's open to having this conversation, it would be a great opportunity.
So we got a question for Ryan from Andrea Galato. As an applied linguist, I am always concerned when faculty members not trained in foreign language assessment are evaluating the language ability of a student. Is there a way to turn this off?
So you definitely don't have to share it with the faculty. I think CMU is just giving that option to the faculty to be able to look at those scores. I definitely have grad programs that only one person has access to the dashboard, and that's where it stays. So you definitely cannot share that access with everyone. It's completely up to the protocols of, you know, what you're trying to assess and who needs to see eyes on that. But I know it just definitely depends on the university and how they're utilizing the exam.
Okay, and another question from Laura Look. For faculty, this is for Ryan as well. For faculty to have access to the video and writing sample, do they need access to the dashboard, or is there a way to send a direct link for just the student in question?
Yeah, great question. So within that dashboard, there's actually a downloadable link that you can just send directly to the faculty if they just want to see the essay and or the video interview itself. And then if you're within Slate, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, I definitely don't work for Slate, and I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure if you have Slate throughout the campus, if they can log into Slate, they'll be able to actually get into those student interviews. Is that correct?
The way it works with Slate is it integrates into Slate Reader. And again, this is all configurable by your school. So the school can allow it at any level. But for us, and when Ryan says it takes a minute to sign up, even our technical person for Slate called me and said that took 15 minutes to do the API integration. Like, it is very quick. But so for Slate, it integrates into Reader as just another tab on the application. So when a faculty member is going through, they can see what they say, and it also integrates into the summary page that we have. But in addition, Ryan, what I will say about the access, because we ran into that in our first year when it was not integrated in Slate, I did provide, we have general login for the department, and I did provide that to faculty. And I know that some faculty chose to log in and some faculty did not. But I will say, so you can do that downloadable URL that takes you directly to that student. And then the other piece that is really helpful, and I'm not sure in practice how this would work, but the email that you have connected to your Duolingo actually sends, you can have it send an email directly to the administrator. So for example, I get an email every time a student submits a Duolingo test to CMU for the entire College of Engineering. I know some people will find that annoying, but for me, if I have a student who says to me, oh, I took my test, usually within 15 or 20 minutes, I'll see it pop up in my email and I can see it immediately there. And that takes you directly to the student's record, their scores, and to their and to the video also. So there's a ton of different ways, and I know learning and working with faculty, this has been new for me because my the majority of my experience in higher ed has been at the undergraduate level. Faculty, drive the review and the reading at the graduate level very much, in the PhD level. And so making it usable, user-friendly, and flexible for the faculty to use is really important. And I think that this meets that mark.
So we've got a question here from Lily Compton, I think getting at some of the privacy questions that we're seeing popping up here. So Ryan, can you elaborate more about access to students' videos? In particular, is it only for admission?
Good question. So it really is up to the university on who they actually want to share access with. Again, it really relies within your own policies as far as who can see that data. So we're not sharing that data or logins with anyone that shouldn't be able to have access. Everything on our end is encrypted and is all behind a wall. And who you give access to is to get through that wall is really up to you. We give one email and one code or an API for that. And then again, it's up to the university or college to decide on who actually can see those things.
Right, and obviously our department, we have many privacy faculty, so we get that question a lot. And what I will say, and another question I was just asked in this process was, do students have to sign off on having it come to the university? And Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't automatically show up to the university. The student has to go in there and select the university so that we can see it through our mechanism. And also, now the invite, I think, is a little bit different, because if the invite comes from the university, then I think that the student's essentially signing off by accepting that invitation. So again, there's multiple ways that can happen, but privacy is really important.
Yeah, there's two. Jennifer talked about the invite. So if you're inviting straight from your dashboard, that comes with a unique link. When they click on that link, it'll actually have the privacy within that email to say, if you decide to use this link and take the full exam, CMU would actually get your score automatically. If they go through the traditional way, which I'd say 99% of the students do, they go through the dashboard, the student dashboard, they have to select the school, and there actually are two notifications to say, are you sure the, CMU is going to be able to see your scores, see your interviews, see your essays, and then they actually say yes to that and then send that on.
So time, I think, for two more. So the first from Lynette Michael, she asks, how are the score reports sent to institutions, and can they be uploaded into student administration systems, for example, PeopleSoft? So Ryan, I think you'll probably want to take that one.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what I was just walking through is that student journey, and as they're sending that score. So that score is then sent to the institutional dashboard. Jennifer talked about getting those email notifications saying you have a new score available. You actually can turn that off if you get too many. That is the feature that we offer. But once you're within that dashboard, you'll see the full score report. So the overall scores, their sub-scoring, their written interview, and their essay all live within that dashboard, whether it be our internal dashboard or a Slate API or another API. So going back to PeopleSoft, if you have a really great tech team that can work our API into PeopleSoft, absolutely, you can use that. Or you can just use our direct login to your dashboard and see it that way. What was the, sorry, Matt, what was the second part of that question? I think there was a second part of that.
Let me look here.
Well, while you're looking for that, I will say my previous admission was with a PeopleSoft school, and we used AAWS, which is their application web services in PeopleSoft. And again, I don't know the technical details, but I suspect based on what I know from building that website, that application and Slate, that you could potentially use the API to connect it there too.
Matt, actually, I know what it was. So we have a downloadable CSV file within the dashboard. So if you really want to get the raw data and just download it and implement it into your CRM system like PeopleSoft, you can do it that way as well.
Oh, and that reminds me too, actually, Ryan, sometimes we'll have students who say, you know, it looks like you didn't receive my scores. How does that work? And again, I can download that list, provide the actual direct URL, talk with our tech team and match that up or reach out to the student. So that also works as a really good troubleshooting tool.
So we've got time for one more question from Devin Jensen. And this, I think, gets to how it's particularly useful for graduate education. Are there different tests depending on if you're a graduate applicant or an undergrad applicant? And what are some of those differences, if so?
Yeah, really good question. So there's not. So this is the general English ability test across the board, whether you be a 50-year-old student or a student that's just turned 18. Being an adaptive exam, it's really going to evaluate your levels at the very highest level of English ability to the very lowest. And so, you know, I would encourage you to take the test. And if you reach out to me, I actually can get you the test for free to actually go through it, you know, as an English speaker and find out how hard it really can get, because that adaptive model really kind of covers the basis between a graduate level program or all the way down to even elementary levels of English.
Well, I want to thank both of you, Ryan and Jennifer, for your wonderful presentation and for answering these questions. This presentation recording, as well as the slides, will be sent to all webinar attendees. So if you missed anything, you will have the recording and slides coming to you soon so that you can revisit that content. So thanks again, Ryan and Jennifer, and thank you to Duolingo English Test for their sponsorship of this webinar. We just want to mention one Council of Graduate School event, which is supporting graduate student mental health and well-being report release, which will be on April 29th. And there will be a webinar in support of that report release from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. As with all of our CGS webinars, there will be links to register for upcoming webinars, as well as links to recent webinar recordings available at the URL below. Thank you again to all of the presenters, and thank you to the audience for your great questions and for your participation today. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.